So we couldn't risk things like file naming changes can't change. The system, whatever replacement system needed to keep that. And actually, I would say the root of the success of the system actually comes from having a good file naming convention. If you're gonna look at something like this and you're looking at something that needs to be, you're thinking, oh, you've got a lot of different outputs and you've got a lot of different sort of file formats or endpoints, having a good file naming convention really helps with that. Another point, we needed to be able to flight check and have custom error handling terms. It's really important that we're not sending production files on to the printers which are damaged or corrupt in any way, because that's not going to help. And it needed to be able to support multiple imposition templates. So we've got probably over 50 different products which all have their own requirements and their own outputs. So that was also quite key. Supporting multiple file formats. So whilst PDF is by far the most common, we're also using JPEG files, we're using PNG files, we're using XML and text files in places to support all of the different print formats. So whilst we've got a number of large format digital presses, we're also sending jobs to wide format printers, dye sublimation printers, direct to garment printers. We've got a heat transfer process. We're also laser engraving, so we're using Switch to send jobs to a downstream laser engraving to automate that as well. So we've had to sort of, it's not just PDF that we're looking at, it's all different file formats and different types of printer that this can work with. Needs to be able to batch based on a lot of different parameters. When Tom, my colleague, in a second introduces and goes through one of the workflows, you'll see some of the batching parameters that we need to batch by. Whether an obvious one is for us in greeting cards, we have this concept of sort of direct cards or back to me, where on the website the customer can order something direct to the end recipient, or they can have it sent back to themselves with an extra envelope. So, but just that one difference and having different sizes, the permutations start to grow out. So yeah, the batching can be quite complex. Having detailed logging, reporting, and a debugging method. So we want to, for all of those sort of thousands of files that we're processing, we want to be able to track and trace every single one of them as well. If there's an error handling is really crucial to be alerted upon, and the Switch dashboard is really handy for that. It's an online browser based one, so you can access it anywhere. So we have that up on screen in our studio when we want to respond to that. And another one which a key requirement is the underlying infrastructure. So we needed the system to work on a virtual infrastructure basically, and we're using VMware, which I don't know if it's relevant for other people, but it is very handy for really good for backups and for recovery if an instance has failed and you need to restore information. So we're using that, and it's good for we've got a kind of multi-site or a multi-license solution. So we have a staging environment, which is a kind of slimmed down setup of the Switch system and the 4P system, which we use for testing and proving everything works. And then we've got two kind of production environments, which are more highly spec'd, and they're still an exact copy, but the performance of the two systems is enhanced on the other two. So we're using the three different systems really. So that was some of the functional requirements that we needed out of the solution. With the functional side of it, we also needed really high guaranteed performance. It's no good with all of the functions without that. So we went through probably 2 months of purely just performance testing, and we did a very rigorous test approach of benchmarking between the previous application and the Switch application to make sure we were definitely going to be able to replace this in time. We actually had a deadline because we were coming up to Christmas last year, and so we had to get something in place for that. And if that's our biggest trading period of the year. So if we didn't have it working, it was really important that we proved that worked. But we gradually gained confidence with it, and we can. One of the stats that I've got here, just sort of summarized, we can probably process about 20,000 unique PDFs every hour using Switch. So we're quite assured of being able to get the orders through in time. That's just sort of one of the sort of benchmarks that we keep in mind with the current sort of setup that we've got. It is largely dependent on the network, the underlying network speed, and the operating system and the processes that you've got. So with Switch, you can turn on or turn off the concurrency of the different Switch processes. So we spent a lot of time tuning the different settings within Switch to get the right performance output, which I would recommend spending as much time as possible getting right before putting it into production. So yeah. Yeah, I think that's kind of it in terms of kind of what we needed in terms of like the requirements and what we went through, and we went through this process, like I said, about this time last year. Well, after June last year was when we actually started putting in the process and testing everything. And so we went live with it October, November, and then since then we haven't really looked back. It's been and it was really smooth plugging it in. The risks, like it was very good. One other thing, I'm not going to tell you the pricing or anything like that, but what I would say is, according to some of the other for what Switch does out and for what it's capable of doing, we're probably only using, I don't know, maybe 10% of the features and the plugins that we can still use it for. So the value that's there to be had out of it is very, very good, I would say, as well. So that's definitely another key feature. And yeah, I think that's probably a time to hand over to you, Tom, to go through a walkthrough if you want. I've sort of been through some of the requirements, unless anyone's got any questions at that point on that.
Well, first of all, I copied the Funky Pigeon URL in the chat window. If someone wants to see what kind of products you're talking about or order something, I guess, then they can do that. The funkypigeon.com URL is in there. There was one question, but I don't know whether you are going to talk about that later, Tom, or not. But there was one question about what kind of server you have the Switch workflows running on, what kind of hardware you're running it on.
I think that'd be a question for John.
Yeah, well, yeah, we're using VMware and the Windows. Well, it's a Windows Server environment, Windows Server 2012, 2016, yeah, 2016. So yeah, that's the what we're running it on, basically on VMware.
I have a question, and you're not obliged to answer, but just from a commercial point of view. And I can imagine you don't want to disclose it, but who were the other contenders to get the business?
Yeah, I don't know if I can.
Okay, if you can, though, I said, if you cannot disclose, you cannot disclose.
Yeah.
No hard feelings.
I can tell you they're global print businesses.
That's a
very well known brands that you would be aware of. So yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody else, or are you all still good? Yeah, there was one other question about the Switch tandem setup, but I think we'll look at what Tom is going to share, because that will kind of answer itself, I think.
Yeah,
quite possibly. Okay, hey guys, I'm Tom, as you all know. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen with you all, so you can see one of our workflows, which is on our staging environment that John was mentioned just a bit earlier. A second. Right. Here we go. Right, so one of the things when we first started talking with David and Andy was we had, obviously, like John specified, we've got over 50 different products that we produce, and David thought it'd be really a very beneficial thing to do would be to have like a root workflow that every other workflow just grows from. So a lot of the workflows are identical apart from the way the product that they're handling and the imposition, like the sheet config and stuff like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through, this is the A5 card, which is our most popular product. So I'm just going to go through it from the beginning. So first of all, we start with the input folder, which is where all of our files land, first of all. So they come out of our PDF creation program. They land in here, and then they get split off into two directions. They go, so first of all, they go into the input archive. So the input archive is a collection that we've got of all of our backed up PDFs from all the different workflows. And all the files stay here for about 72 hours, and then they're called upon when we need to do like a reprint. So number 2 is reprint input. So if, say for example, a PDF gets printed at our print facility, and it's damaged, it gets dropped, there's smudges or something, there's a problem with the printer, and it needs to be reprocessed, they can use that barcode using our software, and it will pick up the file and drop it back into this reprint input folder. And then from here, passes through into the process reprint. Here it gives it an ID so that it's amended as a new job, and then it gets added into the original workflow. So if there's a first order, it comes from the input, comes into capture job properties. And here is a custom script which assigns the card the product name, which you can see in the settings down here, properties, A5 card, how many pages it's expecting. And something here, we've got explode copy count. And as John specified earlier, there was a naming logic for all the PDFs and stuff like that. And for cards, there's occasions where someone orders multiple cards. So say, for example, you're ordering a thank you card for some presents, you've ordered 5 of that card. Instead of us producing 5 PDFs at the original point, Switch will handle that. So we will have a 5 in the file name somewhere, and this explode copy count will multiply that PDF out, so we've got 5 versions of it instead of just the 1. And then from here, we moved into parse job properties, which is essentially just a holding folder for the next step. And then here we've got detect broken files, which is actually a pdfToolbox profile, which checks the PDFs for any problems. So that's the syntax issues, if the document is damaged in any way, if the file size is less than a kilobyte, because normally ours are somewhere between 500 mega plus, and if the number of pages is incorrect. Now this was originally, it didn't have the syntax issues, which was a problem that we found out just after Christmas. We found we were missing some cards when it came to the end of the day, and our print manager was shouting at us, essentially, where are missing files. And then after some checks after Christmas, we found there was a syntax issues with some of the PDFs that we weren't picking up. Spoke to David and Andy, and within a few days, they'd come back with, here, this is what you need to do, this is what you need to change. Went in, changed it, took about 10 minutes worth of testing. Yeah, that's fine. And we put it to our live system. So if we do have any of our broken files, they go off to here, which is 05 error files to prod 2. Now prod 2 is a state of an order that we use to track orders through our own print system. So what they do is the PDF comes through into this folder, and then from here there's another custom script which takes the file name of that PDF and creates a text file. The text file has that file name, and inside the contents is that file name as well. And now that text file sits in this folder location, and we've got a custom program which grabs text files from there every 10 minutes or so, and then it will send that back to the set it back to pending in our custom admin tool, which allows the program to recreate the job, recreate the PDF, and pump it back into the workflow from the beginning. And it normally doesn't cause any more problems from there. So if the card is fine, it goes into single cards, singles held for batching process. So here all the singles build up until they meet the criteria for the create batches script. So we'll just make this a bit bigger because there's quite a lot going on in here. So for cards, for example, there are actually, John mentions that there's a direct and back to me. So direct, obviously straight to the recipient. Back to me is, so you send it back to yourself and with an extra envelope. We've actually got 11 different batching variations. And one of those, well, 6 of those are based on color. So if I just go through this properties with here, the batch frequency is how long, well, maximum wait time is how long it holds files for. So if we're wanting a batch size of 16, but after this many seconds, we don't reach those 16, it will automatically create a batch. The folder is scanned every 240 seconds. So this folder here, over peak or Christmas sort of time, we were seeing probably like 500 cards sitting in this folder, waiting to be batched, waiting for the time to go down. And then once the time's reached, 16 cards are all sent together, whether that's by postage or color as well. And this flushing is an additional feature we had put in after we went live with it. What's the flushing feature? We also had in the wash up time, which in our previous program we used before Switch, there was a program that the print manager could run at the end of the day, where there'd be a few more cards coming through towards the end of the day, and he only had to wait for 5 or 6. But instead of having to wait for the allotted time, he could hit run all and he would get anything that was waiting, just everything would print. But with Switch, we didn't have that capability. So David wrote us extra bits for the script so that there was a wash up time that would begin whenever we wanted and it would end whenever we wanted. And it would reduce the wait time just for that time period, which would allow the cards to come through faster and it would allow our print manager to wash up.
I think this was for us probably the most challenging bit of the whole process, is that on the one hand, we wanted it to be completely automatic. And on the other hand, there were some things in there that in the past, you actually had someone tweak the process manually as it was running in order to optimize it. And the goal here was to make sure that you didn't have to do that anymore, but that everything would be taken care of automatically. And that's why there is, well, there are so many of these settings that you have on this particular script, because it depends on the volume of the job that goes through and so on. So this took a little bit of time to fine tune as well. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like David says, before we had it come in and David was working on it, I was going in every day and changing the preferred batch size and the wait time to be reduced so that our print manager could get the cards faster. And then when the day was over, I'd increase it back up to its normal rate. I mean, the wash up mode really was a godsend.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, David. Right, and then once those PDFs are all combined, so we've got our 16, they get merged together into one big PDF. So it just, each card is 2 pages, so 16, that'd be 32 page PDF. And it's merged here. And then this is just a holding folder. And then here we reach the batch template, which uses the run list config and the sheet config settings that are predetermined in our system. So they're different for A5 cards as they are towards different sort of cards, square cards, for example, and other products. Just how many on a sheet, how big the sheet is, things like that. And then once it's through there, holding folder. And then here we reach our output location API. So using our own API system, which is based on product name, this calls our API, and then we're able to send the PDF, the batched PDF, to a necessary print location. So each product has a different print location it needs to go to for a different folder, a different hot folder for our printers. Some of them need to go to another system entirely. And we've got our own inbuilt admin tool where we can manage this ourselves. And also from here, we go where to output. And then another problem we found over Christmas was we had some problems where our API wasn't sending the batches where we thought they were going. It was just erroring the batches, but wasn't letting us know that. Once we found that problem, brought it to David and the team, and then they managed to assign an error status to the PDF if it hadn't gone to the API. So if the error status is true, it goes off to API copy errors and then into our email system, which I'll go over in a second. If there's no problems, it was fired off to the API correctly, fired off to the correct location. It goes for a batch archive preparation. You can see this still blue arrow goes from the top here. So if I go back up to process 7, this is where all the singles were. So what we needed to do was we needed all the single PDFs of the original batch to be available, as well as the final batch PDF. So in this folder here is where all the singles meet all the singles of the batch meet the final batch PDF. And then there's an assemble job which puts them into the same folder, and then a holding folder, and then finally we land in the batch archive, which is where we hold all the batches for 72 hours. So it's a case of error handling for us, because sometimes there's occasions where the print manager says that he's missing a few cards, and then if we've still got the cards from 72 hours prior, we can go into the system, we can find out where those cards are, we can determine whether there was a problem with that batch. If there were other cards in that batch that he has received, then we can let him know, yeah, you definitely had those cards, they are somewhere in the system, and then he can reprocess them if necessary. Going back over to the problem jobs here, the problem, this sort of, we got issues with jobs, PDFs and stuff. Most of the time, the errors we get through this are naming convention. So there'll be some manual error fixing that will go on before we get to switch, where PDFs might get put in the wrong output folders. So it's often sometimes where we might put the wrong card size into an A5 card workflow. It'll land at the top, and then it reads that it's not an A5 card, it's an A4 card, for example. It'll land in the problem jobs folder. Then it'll go through this process, which sends an email to, you can see here our email, the email address it sends to, but it sends to an email group, which has got 4 of us from IT in it, and then we can see that there's a problem. And there's also, if I just bring up the information, we get information which workflow it comes from, the fail message, and if there is an API error or not. And then from that email, we can determine what we need to do with the job, what actions we need to take to fix it and get the PDF to where it needs to be. Well, as I said at the start, David suggested that we have a root workflow where everything is based off of this, which was a brilliant idea. However, there are occasions where we have products which have 2 files, so there's 2 partner files. So this is A5 card we're on now. So I'm going to go to Cushion, where we've got 2 files that we receive. So we've got a PDF job ticket and then a partner JPEG file or PNG. And the job ticket file is sent to the printers, and then once the print facility guys have that, they scan a barcode, and that barcode brings in the high-res JPEG, and the JPEG is the one they use for print. So obviously input folder as per the last workflow. And then we've got set product data, and this sets the product data over to the product name, and if there's a postage type, and then we define the postage type. The real reason for this is we need to set the product data, because the product data is what allows us to use the API system, because the API system looks for a specific product name assigned to that job. And go to file split, and then from here we split the file up into production file and job ticket, and we use these lines here. We can define the file type, sorry. Oh, that's the wrong one. So this one specifically is Adobe PDF, and then this one will be JPEGs or PNGs. And then from here, same as the other one, we've got the output location API. And then if there's any errors, it fires off into our email system. I don't know if anyone's got any particular questions about anything our workflows are doing, if I can answer those.
I'll make a remark while people are thinking about that. I think especially if you look at the workflow like this A5 card workflow, there's quite a few scripts throughout this workflow in there. In general, you have kind of two principles you can use while you're designing switch workflows. And the first is to use all the built-in tools and as little scripting as you humanly can. In my experience, that often leads to having a little bit more folders and flow elements in there, because you have to use the built-in tools and kind of combine them. We didn't do that for Funky Pigeon, I think, for two reasons. The first reason is that I built it, and I'm a developer, so I tend to write scripts. But the second reason, and that was the most important one, is that the performance guideline that we had received was quite stringent. So we had to make this as quick as possible in order to meet the expectation and have files processed as quickly as we could. And minimizing the workflow actually helped in that case. And yeah, you have to process the files through some scripts, but that's only one step in the workflow, and it's in many cases going to be faster than processing it through 15 other workflow elements that would accomplish the same thing without scripting, perhaps. So if you think that there are a lot of scripts in this, then yes, you're absolutely correct. We have tried to make them all reusable. So if you would go through all the different workflows, you would see that all in all, we don't have that many scripts. They're just reused in different places, and they're flexible enough to allow you to do that. Yeah. But it did help with performance, I think, in the end.
100%. Yeah. I mean, I think it's more than double the performance of the previous application. So yeah, it was good. I mean, what? Yeah.
Go on, John. Sorry.
No, that's right, Karen.
I was just going to say, I think one of the things that we highlighted with the flow as well, which I think was one of the points that you've always mentioned to us with particular error handling as well. It's hard to describe to people what it's like to experience handling 20,000 files an hour and what happens if that goes wrong, and the mess you get in to try and fix it up, and the backup that you need to, or the process that you need to go through to actually then get those files back through production, because every file that comes through your system has already been paid for, and someone is expecting it tomorrow. That's the criticalness of it.
And it can also be in sort of disaster recovery, like maybe a press has gone down and we've lost a lot of files from another problem. We need to put everything back around. You don't want something that's going to be, churning away to get. You need the files through as soon as possible, back on another press or something like that as soon as possible. So it's also being able to recover as fast as possible, as well as in sort of real-time production at the same time.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I think one of the sorry, that question.
There is a question here about Switch in the sense that everyone wants to know the same thing, I think. how many cores you're using on the servers, and what you're doing with concurrent processes. What your switch license does in terms of concurrent processes.
That's what they have to test. That's what you guys have got to test. I mean, like I said, we spent, I think in total, the project was like a 6-month project, but once we got into the testing, that was purely 3 months of purely testing. So, because we just had to get it right. So you just have to tune it for we've tuned it for what we need and what we use. And I imagine there'll be other user cases which would use slightly different configurations. So it just comes down to, you know, you've got to expect to put in a lot of time, and not out of the box. It's not going to be like, even when we turned it on for the first time, it was like, oh, not as fast as you thought. And then you just have to start tweaking it, and you start getting familiar with it and tweaking it. So that's what I would say. It's going to be different for everyone. Sure.
And I think I can share that much, but I won't go too far, is that I think the advantage you have is that you have a lot of different products, and because they're all implemented as different workflows, it kind of makes it easy to do load where you have it as well.
Yeah. One thing I would say that's also really, really impressive performance-wise from a PDF perspective is file size. So whilst we do cards, we also produce calendars. Calendars are a much larger file, and we get a lot of what Tom referred to multi-orders of those, so people ordering more than one of the same calendar. It's just as fast processing a A5 card as it is processing, you know, a multi-page document calendar. It's the same. It doesn't seem to mind whether it's a smaller PDF or a larger one. So for us, when calendars at Christmas are one of the biggest challenges that we have to get through, to have a workflow which is processing them as fast as cards is really impressive. So yeah, I guess that's within the engine of within Switch itself, how it handles PDFs. So yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, I think it's partly down to, again, what kind of system you're running, because of course the system has to keep up with copying the file or moving the file over and so on. But Switch is definitely optimized to move things from place to place. And if you're moving a file on an operating system, it doesn't really matter how big it is in most cases. And I think the other advantage you have is that where you pre-flight, because pre-flight normally would actually depend on file size, but the pre-flight that you do is sufficiently limited because you have a closed system in front of it. It's sufficiently limited that it doesn't really matter, I think, how big the file is. It more looks at structural problems than anything else. So it doesn't slow much there as well. Yeah.
One of the other things that I think was important as well, because we spent a considerable amount of time just getting one product working, and you did a considerable, I mean, there was a hell of a lot of testing at the start to get even one flow tweaked to the point and scripted to the point where it actually worked. But we had to do that because of the range of products that you do and the range of products that you potentially also roll out as new ones even now. To replicate a flow and to have it up and running and working in well, I mean, it's in less than an hour, isn't it? You can duplicate a flow and have a new product ready to go.
Yeah. I mean,
relatively quickly.
I don't know if Tom, you want to allude a bit more on that and like how easy it is for staging for live.
Yeah, I mean, duplicating up, say if we had a new product, it would all depend on what the end result of that product was. So, for example, I said about how similar the workflows are. So at the moment we're on A5 card, and John said about calendars. You can see the difference is nothing. Like the fact that we could flick between workflows just by changing some information here. So the product name pages is 28 pages instead of 2. Like it was very easy. Like if I needed to create a new workflow from one of these and I knew it was 2 pages, 5 pages, it was very basic. It would take me, I mean, to duplicate the workflow, probably about 10 minutes. But the real problem is, not the problem, but the real challenge would be getting the imposition, the sheet config and the run list getting that to look exactly how I wanted it to look. But yeah, like Andy said, like less than an hour, I think, and I'd get a workflow up and running.
For people who don't know pdfToolbox very much, when Tom talks about cheat config and run list, those are the two imposition configuration files that you need to do any kind of imposition inside of pdfToolbox. So each of these products that you see here has its own configuration files, because there's a multiple number of ups on the sheet, and the position is different and the other information is different. So yeah, that's probably the most time consuming part of duplicating something.
Yeah, definitely.
We had a question in, John and Tom, what's the overall volume in, I guess they want to know how many gigabytes or terabytes per day you guys pump through. I mean, that's a hard one to print out, but you've got a rough idea.
I'm just trying to look up the statistic now. I saw the question come in and I'm struggling to find it. I've got it down here, but
it's a lot.
It's a lot.
Yeah. I was trying to find it in an email here and I'm struggling to find it, but
it's not a Google.
No, it's not, unfortunately. Just see.
But again, that's the importance, because your flows are receiving files from one server that's in the cloud to other servers that are off-site. So there's a hell of a lot of transit bandwidth that you guys are dealing with on a daily basis.
Yeah, it's in the terabytes of when it's photo upload data, it's in the terabytes each day, like on a peak trading period. I know that for sure. So the website, that's just the photos alone, which are being processed within. So each card can have multiple photos on it. A calendar itself can have multiple photos on each page. So the photo upload data is actually this is a process that happens upstream before Switch really gets to it, but that's one of the bigger challenges of what we have to sort of handle each day. But yeah, it's in the terabytes each day on a peak trading period for sure, because people upload photos that they don't necessarily always use, so we're having to handle the ones which are discarded as well as take the ones which are cropped and edited as well. So yeah, it's in the terabytes.
And then all deleted and starts again tomorrow.
Yeah. So I mean, disk space is another thing we need to keep an eye on. So we try and keep the production system as lean as possible. We don't keep the files any longer than they really need to be there, just to keep the, as it is a Windows system, you just need to keep the files, like the folder structure, down low and keep the files moving as much as possible.
Yeah, like 72 hours is our normal time frame for keeping files, but when it gets to peak trading, like we just had Mother's Day, and that was priority was A5 cards, and we had to reduce down the time we kept them from 72 hours to 48 hours just to free up like hundreds of gigabytes worth of space, because we just had too many PDFs in there.
But your system doesn't allow any kind of reprint of jobs or something like that, so you don't have to keep it for that. It's just for production purposes, and then it can be.
Basically.
It's faster for us to just look up the order and just reprocess it back around the system. Like I said, it takes from web to print, it's about 10 minutes. So we would just regenerate the file from scratch and just sort of bring it all the way back around again. There are other tools that we've got within the further downstream in the production system that they can reprocess something, bypassing some stages of it. So there's different ways of reprocessing, but in general, we can just put something back around, and it doesn't take very long to reprocess it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions from anyone? Now would be a really good time. I think they're all too impressed.
Yeah, everyone knows everything now.
Okay.
I've got a quick question, David, if that's all right.
Yes, absolutely.
One for John, please. These files that we're looking at, I take it that the PDFs that hit it have been pre-flight checked before this.
Yeah, so yeah, Switch is doing the pre-flight checking.
It's here in detect broken files is where the flight checking is done.
But they are not files from, and I think maybe that's the question, Rob. They are not files that come from immediately from the outside. So they're not random files. They are usually generated by some other system. So they are more reliable than just something that you would get from customers who upload whatever.
Yeah, so we've got upstream, there's another application which is compiling and creating the individual card PDF. And then from there, we send that PDF, which has already been built, onto the Switch system, which is dispatching and imposing and checking the files. So, yeah.
So the quality control that is done here is more to detect whatever could go wrong with that system in front of it, or in the communication between that system and this Switch system, for example, than it is to really detect bad input from the outside. And I think that that also makes it lighter and makes it so that this is a faster process. If we would have to do full pre-flight, it would take more time.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I see what you mean now. As in the true pre-flight. Yeah, these are just the custom checks that we know need to be done on the file to allow it to go through. Yeah.
So when because a lot of, I take it that your website, it's all templates, and the customer can personalize their card, and they can upload images and whatever.
Yeah.
So the customers, because we suffer from you know, people uploading a load of rubbish. So that is, you handle that outside of Switch when the customer uploads a low resolution file for their, you tell them.
Yeah, so we've got built-in checks on the website if it's too dark, if it's too low res, and it will advise the customer they can continue if they want, but we're advising them, and that gets recorded that they've acknowledged that they're using a poor quality image when it comes to the printed product. So yeah.
And are you using Callus for that?
No, we're not using that. No, that's our own solution that we've developed for that.
It's been a while since I looked at this profile, but if I remember correctly, there is almost no graphics check in there whatsoever. So none of the typical things that you would check files from customers against is in there. What we're doing is entirely different. It's just trying to figure out whether this could be a valid PDF file.
Yeah, what's done on the website has got at this stage, got no connection to the print production side of it. They're very, very separate, actually.
There's two kind of errors that you get with your PDFs, John, isn't there? Because you get some that you open up that have got corrupt images in them where the PDF's damaged, but you've got some that actually open up that look like they are a valid file. And if they should print, but actually when they rip and process, they haven't got an end of file in, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's just checking and making sure that everything that is batched together is a valid, correct PDF that can print, and everything that in that batch that's detected by pre-flight is then cycled back around and regenerated.
Yeah.
Then add back into another batch just to keep the flow moving, so there's no bad prints on the press, so there's no wasted press time and repeated orders that are bad with missing data on them, etc.
I mean, one of the biggest risks, or one of the biggest worries that I had which is the worst case scenario, is that the files are going through, but the wrong insides of the cards are going on the wrong fronts of the cards, and the cards are then going out. Like, that would be the absolute worst case scenario. So data integrity and absolutely 100% knowing that the right slots, the images are going into the right slots on the imposition is paramount, really. You can't afford to get that wrong.
And with additional marks that go on those templates as well, because of the finishing kit that you use as well, that's something that gets defined.
Yeah, that's done in pdfToolbox a lot. Yeah, it's done in pdfToolbox.
Yeah. You weren't the only one with that concern, by the way.
I don't think anyone that's got a production workflow wants the wrong side going on the wrong.
And especially with the kind of logic that you have in this batch creation, and then the fact that sometimes you have products that have a job ticket coming with them and so on. It was you have to make sure that they're running.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that they're matching up for sure.
There was one more detailed question from Jan, whether we use pdfToolbox quick checks, and the answer to that is no, because we can't. Some of the checks that we're doing are, so for those who don't know, quick checks is quick check is a way to do pre-flight without doing pre-flight. So it doesn't load the full pdfToolbox pre-flight library, it loads only a subset. And it can give you very quick information on key things in the PDF, like number of pages or the media trim box sizes and so on. So if you have large PDFs coming in and you only want a very small amount of information, quick check is much faster, order of magnitudes faster than running a pre-flight profile. Unfortunately, some of the checks that we do here, like the broken images that John mentioned, is something that you can't do in quick check because you actually have to look at elements on the page and so on. So we have to do it during using regular pre-flight.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I've just found well, a particular stat on the data being processed. So on a peak day, maybe 27, 28 gig an hour we're processing through the website in terms of photo data.
Okay.
So, yeah, that'll give you a bit of insight into what we're having to sort through and process. That's just photos.
That's not bad. And it doesn't stop at 5 p.m., I guess.
No, it just continues constantly. I mean, at the moment, I mean, obviously, yeah, we've had to put in some quite radical changes in short term to keep, whilst everyone's, like, the factory has got minimal staff in it for safety reasons in the current event. So we've had to do some quite inventive production solutions, but we've managed to do it. So yeah.
But you are still producing during all of this.
Yeah.
Are you still producing at the same level, or did you manage?
Yeah, I mean, we're currently in what we described as a peak trading period, like peak trading period for our traditional peak trading events are Christmas, Valentine's Day, Mother's Day, and Father's Day. But we're receiving traffic like that every day at the moment because people are at home and just wanting to order online. So yeah, it's just a continual peak at the moment. So, but we're having to do very granular, careful shifts for keeping everyone distanced and things like that. So yeah, doing things in a very structured way, like printing carefully and then cutting separately and doing things like that. So, but yeah.
But it's interesting to hear that normally the feedback is that graphic arts in general is not doing very well during all of this, but you're probably in part of the business where that is not the case, and you might get more business than you would otherwise get just because people are at home. And yeah, it makes sense. Okay. So thank you very much, John and Tom. That was I think very interesting. So thank you very much for wanting to be here, John and Tom.
Yeah.
Well, you're welcome.
No problem. Yeah, it was good. Thanks for everyone to join in.
And to everyone else, thank you for joining. So have a great day, all of you, and I'm sure I will see you back in an upcoming cafe. Have a great day.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.